Today, we're digging into one of history's all-time greatest rebels, Spartacus. But we're not just here for the legend. We're going to try and peel back those layers of myths to find the real person, the Thracian gladiator who brought the Roman Republic to its knees.
You know this line, right? I am Spartacus. It's that unforgettable moment from the classic movie, and for decades, it's pretty much defined who we think Spartacus was, a selfless hero, ready to die for his people. It's the legend, distilled into 3 perfect words.
Look, the Hollywood version is an amazing story, but the real story? I think it's even more incredible. To get to it, we have to look past the movie version of an ideological revolutionary and find the real, pragmatic soldier underneath.
All right, so first things first, let's break down the myth itself, the Spartacus of pop culture, the one we all think we know.
This right here gets to the absolute heart of it. The myth gives us Spartacus the freedom fighter, a man trying to end slavery for everyone everywhere. But the historical sources, they paint a very different picture. They show us Spartacus the pragmatist, a guy whose main goal was just survival. He wasn't trying to ignite a worldwide social revolution. He was just trying to lead a desperate escape north to get his people out of Italy and back home.
So, to really get why this rebellion happened, you have to understand the world that created it. The late Roman Republic, well, it wasn't a very stable place. It was basically an economic pressure cooker, and the fuel for that fire was slavery.
Just take a second and let that number sink in. 1 in 3. By about 100 BCE, a third of the entire population of Italy was enslaved. This goes way beyond simple inequality. We're talking about a society whose entire economy was built on a foundation of human suffering.
And this was the engine driving it all, the latifundia. You see, as Rome conquered more and more territory, the super-rich bought up huge chunks of land and turned them into these massive factory farms. And they preferred to use enslaved workers, because unlike Roman citizens, they couldn't be drafted into the army. That meant a permanent, disposable labor force.
And this is how that system created the perfect storm. It basically hollowed out Roman society from both ends. You had free farmers who were pushed off their land, forced into the cities, where they became this huge, unemployed, and pretty angry mob. And at the same time, the countryside was filled with these enormous work camps packed with enslaved people, and many of them were former soldiers. The whole thing was a tinderbox, just waiting for a spark.
And that spark, as it turns out, was lit in a gladiator school in Capua. This is where the historical Spartacus finally steps onto the stage, not as some philosopher of freedom, but as a brilliant and totally desperate military strategist.
So who was this guy, really?
Well, the sources tell us he was a Thracian, and most importantly, a former soldier who had probably served in the Roman army. And that is absolutely crucial. It means he knew their tactics, he knew their supply lines, he knew how they thought from the inside out. Plutarch even adds this other fascinating little detail. His wife was a prophetess, and she believed he had this great divine destiny. You can imagine how powerful that belief must have been for his followers.
And it all started so small. I mean, impossibly small. Just 70 or so guys breaking out of their barracks using whatever they could find. Kitchen knives, meat spits, you name it. This was not some grand planned uprising. It was a chaotic, violent, last-ditch effort to survive.
And right away, we get our first glimpse of his military genius. The Romans, totally underestimating these guys, just blocked the only known road up Mount Vesuvius and figured they'd just wait for them to starve. Big mistake. Spartacus improvised. He had his men weave ladders out of wild vines, climb down a sheer, unguarded cliff face, and sneak around to hit the Roman camp from behind. It was a total surprise. And just like that, in one brilliant, unbelievably audacious move, a small band of fugitives became a real army, armed with the weapons of the very soldiers sent to kill them.
But as the army grew, we're talking tens of thousands of followers, a fatal split started to form. Spartacus, ever the pragmatist, wanted to march north, cross the Alps, and get everyone home, free. But his second-in-command, a Gaul named Crassus, had other ideas. He wanted to stay in Italy to plunder and get revenge. This fundamental disagreement, escape versus vengeance, would ultimately doom their entire rebellion. Crassus and about 30,000 of his followers eventually split off, and were later cornered and completely destroyed by the Romans.
And this, right here, brings us to the great mystery of this whole war. Spartacus had just crushed 2 full Roman armies. The road to the Alps, the road to freedom, was wide open. And yet, he turned his massive army around and marched back south. Why? To this day, historians still argue about it. Did his army, feeling invincible after all those wins, refuse to leave Italy? Did he get overconfident and think he could actually sack Rome itself?
We will never know for sure. But what we do know is that this decision sealed their fate. It was the point of no return. With two of its armies shattered and a slave army marching wherever it pleased, the Roman Senate started to panic. So they turned to one man, Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome and a guy known for his absolute bone-chilling ruthlessness.
See, Crassus understood that the problem wasn't just Spartacus, it was that Roman soldiers were terrified of him. So he brought back an ancient, horrifying punishment: decimation. When one of his legions broke and ran from a fight, he had them all line up and then forced them to beat 1 in every 10 of their own comrades to death. The message he sent to his army was brutally, terrifyingly simple: you will fear me far more than you will ever fear the enemy.
So, with discipline brutally restored, Crassus managed to trap Spartacus's army in the toe of Italy. And then, as Plutarch tells us, he started this unbelievable feat of military engineering. He built a wall and a ditch nearly 40 miles long, right across the peninsula, just to seal them in and starve them out.
And this is where the story gets really, truly incredible. For 2,000 years, that wall was just a line in a history book, a story. But just this year, in 2024, archaeologists in Calabria are pretty sure they found it. A section of the wall, the ditch, littered with broken weapons. This is physical, tangible proof of that desperate breakout attempt. All of a sudden, history isn't just a story anymore. It's right there, in the ground beneath our feet.
But breaking out of the trap only delayed the inevitable. Spartacus was pinned between 3 converging Roman armies. He was forced into one last, hopeless battle. He died in the fighting, and his body was famously never found. And for the survivors, a fate far worse than death awaited. 6,000 of them were taken captive.
What Crassus did next wasn't just punishment, it was psychological warfare on a terrifying scale. He lined the Appian Way, the main road from Capua all the way to Rome, with 6,000 crosses. For over 120 miles, anyone traveling that road would pass a crucified rebel one after another after another. It was a gruesome public warning, designed to burn one single message into the mind of every enslaved person in Italy. This is what happens when you dare to resist.
So the rebellion was crushed, the man was dead, the warning had been sent. But the idea of Spartacus, well, that was just getting started. In total defeat, he would become a symbol far more powerful than he ever was in life.
And you can just watch this symbol grow and change through time. His name was adopted by Toussaint Louverture, the leader of the Haitian Revolution, which was the only truly successful large-scale slave revolt in history. He became a personal hero to Karl Marx, who called him the most splendid fellow in ancient history. In the rubble of World War I, German socialists formed the Revolutionary Spartacus League. And then, of course, in 1960, the Hollywood film, written by a blacklisted screenwriter, by the way, repurposed his story as a defiant cry against the McCarthyism of the era. Every generation, it seems, takes the name Spartacus and remakes it in its own image of rebellion.
So in the end, we're left with this question. Who was he? The historical man was a brilliant, maybe even flawed, general who was just fighting to survive. But the legend, well, the legend is something else entirely, isn't it? It's become this powerful, empty symbol, a kind of blank canvas that every new struggle against oppression can project its own hopes onto. Maybe the true legacy of Spartacus isn't what he actually did, but what his name has inspired so many others to do ever since.